My name is Sabrina, and I am a modern art curator. For a long time, the most difficult installation I ever had to manage was my marriage. The story of how I finally dismantled it and built something beautiful in its place isn't just about art. It's about the moment you realize that the people who are supposed to love you the most are actually the ones holding you back. It all culminated on one perfect, chaotic night when my brand new, citywide art festival went head-to-head with my ex-husband's symphony gala, and I learned that the sweetest revenge isn't loud and explosive, but vibrant, interactive, and undeniable. Before I dive into how I turned years of condescension into the biggest cultural event of the year, I'd love to know where you all are watching from today. Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever felt underestimated or had your passion dismissed as frivolous, go ahead and hit that like button, because I have a feeling this story will resonate with you. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on stories from people who decided to rewrite their own narratives. It all started, as these things so often do, with love, or what I believed was love. I met Julian at a fundraiser, one of those sterile, clinking glass affairs where people network more than they donate. I was there representing the small, struggling gallery where I was an assistant curator, hoping to make a connection that might lead to a modest sponsorship. He was there as the star attraction, the first violinist of the city's illustrious symphony orchestra. He was magnetic. When he played, a hush didn't just fall over the room. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. He had this intensity, a focused passion that I recognized because I felt it too, just for a different kind of art. When he finished his piece, a breathtaking Bach partita, he came straight over to me. I was standing by a rather challenging abstract sculpture, all jagged metal and unsettling angles, and I was the only person in the room looking at it. Everyone else was still facing the small stage he'd just vacated. He smiled, a charming, easy smile that didn't quite reach the intensity in his eyes. He said, "I find it fascinating that we can both be in the same room, dedicated to art, and yet be worlds apart." That should have been a warning. Instead, I thought it was romantic. I thought he saw me. I thought he understood that the pulse of human creativity beat in more than just 4/4 time. Our courtship was a whirlwind of beautiful sounds and stunning visuals. He would take me to late-night rehearsals at the Symphony Hall, the vast, empty space echoing with the ghosts of 1,000 performances. I would feel a genuine thrill sitting in the velvet darkness, listening to him coax magic from his violin. In return, I would take him on tours of artist studios in reclaimed warehouses, the air thick with the smell of turpentine and ambition. I'd introduce him to creators who were using scrap metal and digital projections to talk about the world we lived in now. He seemed fascinated. He called my world vibrant and raw. He told me I had an incredible eye, a way of seeing the beauty and meaning in things others would dismiss. For a while, I believed he was the bridge between our two worlds, the one person who could appreciate a Rembrandt and a Rothko, a Mozart and a minimalist sound installation. He was my missing piece, the person who made my passion feel not just valid, but part of a larger cultural conversation. The first time I met his family, the illusion began to crack. The Vanderbilts weren't just a family. They were a dynasty carved from mahogany and old money, held together by the rigid strings of a cello. His father, Maestro Alistair Vanderbilt, was the symphony's conductor, a man who moved with the gravitational pull of a minor planet. His mother, Eleanor, was the chair of the symphony's board, a woman whose pearls seemed to be clenched as tightly as her jaw. They lived in a house that wasn't so much a home as it was a private museum, where even the air seemed curated. The walls were lined with somber, oil-painted ancestors who stared down with silent judgment. Eleanor gave me a tour, her hand gesturing dismissively at the heavy gilt frames. "This is a Sargent," she said, her voice a low hum of ownership. "True artistry. It has provenance. It has history." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My world of modern art, of living artists and challenging ideas, had none of those things. It was rootless. It was temporary. At dinner, the polite interrogation began. Alistair, his fork poised over a piece of fish, asked, "So, Sabrina, Julian tells us you work in a gallery. Tell us, what is the big idea behind this modern art? It all seems rather noisy and desperate for attention, doesn't it?" I tried to explain. I spoke about the way contemporary art reflects the anxieties and innovations of our time, how it challenges our perceptions and sparks dialogue. I talked about an artist I was working with who used discarded plastics to create breathtaking sculptures that commented on consumerism and environmental decay. Eleanor smiled a thin, bloodless smile. "How quaint," she said, taking a delicate sip of wine. It sounds like a very noble form of recycling. The conversation then seamlessly shifted back to their world. The upcoming European tour, the temperament of the new oboist, the scandalous ticket prices at the Met. I was left stranded on my little island of quaint ideas, the tide of their cultural certainty rising around me. Julian squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture I interpreted as solidarity. I would later learn it was a gesture of pacification. When we were married, I moved into his world completely, and the subtle slights became a matter of daily life. My job was a source of constant, gentle amusement for the Vanderbilts. They never said the word silly, but it was always there, shimmering in the air between us. It was at a dinner party about 6 months into our marriage that Julian first coined his pet name for my career. A guest, a wealthy patron of the symphony, asked me what I did. Before I could answer, Julian draped an arm around my shoulders and said with a proud, theatrical laugh, "This is my wonderful Sabrina. She has the most delightfully populist eye for art. She can find the charm in just about anything." He beamed at me, as if he'd just bestowed upon me the highest compliment. The patron and his parents chuckled appreciatively. Populist. It sounded like a disease. It was a verbal pat on the head, a way of saying my taste was common, unsophisticated, and ultimately harmless. It was a backhanded compliment wrapped in a loving smile, and it became my official title in his family. From that day on, at every social event, he would introduce me the same way. "Meet my wife, Sabrina. She has a delightfully populist eye." It always got a knowing little laugh from his parents. It was our bit, and I, desperate for their approval, desperate to keep the peace in my marriage, would smile and play along, feeling a small piece of my soul chip away each time. I tried so hard to bridge the gap. I really did. I thought if I could just learn their language, they would see me as an equal. I subscribed to classical music journals. I read dense biographies of composers whose names I could barely pronounce. I spent hours on my own, listening to symphonies and concertos, trying to understand the intricate structures and emotional nuances. I wanted to be able to sit at their dinner table and offer an opinion on a performance that was more than just, "That was lovely." I wanted to show them I was serious, that my appreciation for culture was not confined to my own frivolous corner of the world. One year, for Christmas, I thought I had found the perfect opening. I had spent months searching for a specific gift for Alistair. Through a contact at an auction house, I'd managed to track down a rare, limited edition lithograph by a mid-century artist Alistair had once, in an offhand moment, mentioned admiring. It was a stark, beautiful piece, a bridge between the classical and the modern. I was so proud, so sure that this gift would finally signal my acceptance. I wrapped it myself, my heart thumping with a nervous, hopeful rhythm. On Christmas morning, in their cavernous living room, he unwrapped it. He held it up, his expression unreadable. "Ah," he said, the sound utterly neutral. "How very graphic." Eleanor leaned over. "Is that the original?" she asked, already knowing the answer. I explained it was a signed lithograph, part of a very small run. "I see," she murmured, her interest already fading as she turned to admire the silk scarf Julian had given her. Alistair thanked me, a perfunctory, polite thank you, and handed the wrapped print to their housekeeper to be put somewhere safe. I never saw it again. Later that day, I found Julian in the library. "They didn't like it," I said, my voice small. He was tuning his violin, his back to me. "It's not that, Sabrina," he said, not turning around. "It's just, Father prefers things with a certain weight. A history. Provenance." It was a thoughtful gesture, though. A thoughtful gesture. Like a drawing from a child. It was then I realized that my efforts were invisible to them. I wasn't a person with a passion. I was a project they were tolerating, and I was failing to meet their standards. My own career was starting to gain traction, which only seemed to make things worse. I had been promoted to a full curator at a more prestigious gallery downtown. I was in charge of my own shows, writing catalog essays, discovering new artists. It was demanding, exhilarating work. But in Julian's world, it was still a hobby. He'd come to my opening nights, but he always seemed distracted, his eyes scanning the room for people he knew from his own sphere. He'd look at a powerful, challenging piece of art I had championed and say something like, "I'm sure that will be very popular with the downtown crowd." The condescension was no longer just from his parents. It was seeping into him, or perhaps it had been there all along and I had just refused to see it. Our arguments became more frequent, and they all circled the same drain of disrespect. I remember one night, after a particularly glowing review of a show I had curated, I was ecstatic. I came home waving the newspaper, feeling on top of the world. Julian was practicing, the mournful notes of a Brahms sonata filling our apartment. He glanced at the paper and offered a lukewarm, "That's nice, darling." I deflated. "Nice. Julian, this is a huge deal for me." The Times called it a landmark exhibition. He finally put his violin down, an expression of weary patience on his face. "Sabrina, I am happy for you. Truly. But you have to understand, from my perspective, the cultural landscape is vast. A review in the arts section for a small gallery show. It's wonderful, for what it is. But it's not the front page. It's not a sold-out run at Carnegie Hall. I just worry that your career path, this world you're in, doesn't have the longevity. The cultural weight. It's so transient." I stared at him, the newspaper crinkling in my fist. "Transient? Julian, the artists I work with are talking about the world we live in right now. Your world is about celebrating dead men. What is more transient than that?" The words were out before I could stop them, sharp and angry. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "That is an incredibly ignorant and disrespectful thing to say," he said, his voice cold. "You don't understand our world. You don't understand the discipline, the history, the legacy. And you don't respect mine." I shot back. "You and your family, you treat me like I run a finger-painting class for adults. That delightfully populist comment you love so much? It's not a compliment, Julian. It's an insult. It's you telling everyone that my taste is cheap and my work is meaningless." He had the audacity to look shocked. "What? No. Sabrina, you're being completely overly sensitive. It's a term of endearment. It's a joke. It means you make art accessible to everyone. Why do you have to turn everything into a fight?" That was the moment the gaslighting became clear. It wasn't just insensitivity. It was a deliberate, sustained campaign to shrink me and my world until I fit neatly into the decorative box he had designed for me. Not long after that fight, I had lunch with my old mentor from my master's program, Dr. Anya Sharma. Anya was a force of nature, a brilliant art historian with a razor-sharp mind and zero patience for pretension. She had been my fiercest advocate and my toughest critic, and I trusted her implicitly. I laid it all out for her. The family, the populist comments, Julian's dismissal of my career, my own frustrating attempts to fit in. She listened patiently, stirring her tea, her dark eyes missing nothing. When I finished, she set her spoon down with a quiet click. "Sabrina," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "let me tell you what you are dealing with. These people, the Vanderbilts of the world, they are not just patrons of culture. They are gatekeepers. For generations, they have defined what true culture is. It is exclusive, it is expensive, it is European, and it is old. It hangs in their halls and is performed in their theaters. It reinforces their own sense of superiority." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Your work, the work you love, is a threat to that. It's democratic. It's messy. It's contemporary. It happens in warehouses and on street corners. It suggests that culture is not a dead thing to be revered, but a living, breathing organism that belongs to everyone. They don't dismiss your work because it's frivolous. They dismiss it because it's dangerous to their worldview." Her words landed like a gut punch, knocking the wind out of me but also, strangely, clearing my head. "He says he loves me," I whispered. Anya gave me a sad smile. "I'm sure he does, in his way. But he loves the idea of you, the charming, quirky wife with the cute hobby. He doesn't love the curator, the professional, the woman who might one day build a world as influential as his own. The question you have to ask yourself is, how long are you willing to be an idea instead of a person?" I left that lunch with Anya's words ringing in my ears. I felt a profound sense of clarity, but also a deep, chilling dread. I knew a choice was coming, and I was terrified to make it. The end didn't come with a dramatic, plate-smashing fight. It came with the quiet, devastating click of a reporter's pen. The city's most prominent lifestyle magazine was running a feature called Power Couples in the Arts, and somehow, Julian and I had made the list. I think the editor was intrigued by the novelty, the classical violinist and the modern art curator. A study in contrasts. I should have known it was a terrible idea, but a part of me, the foolish, ever-hopeful part, thought this might be it. This might be the moment he would publicly acknowledge my work as valid, as equal to his. The reporter, a sharp young woman named Chloe, met us at our apartment. The interview started well enough. Julian was charming and eloquent, talking about the discipline and passion required to be a musician at his level. I spoke about the thrill of discovering a new artist, of giving a platform to a voice that needed to be heard. Chloe seemed genuinely engaged, her questions thoughtful. She asked how we balanced our two very different artistic worlds. Julian leaned back on the sofa, a picture of relaxed confidence. He draped his arm around me, the familiar weight that now felt like a chain. "It's a wonderful synergy, actually," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "I'm the classicist, of course. My world is about preserving a legacy of genius. And Sabrina," he gave me that familiar, loving squeeze, "she's the populist. She has this incredible gift for finding things that appeal to a, shall we say, broader sensibility." He was warming up, performing for an audience of one. Chloe was scribbling furiously in her notepad. "I see my role as upholding a certain standard," he continued, a professorial tone creeping into his voice. "And she champions art for people who don't know any better." The world stopped. The soft scratching of Chloe's pen on her notepad ceased. The ambient noise of the city outside our window seemed to fade to nothing. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. He had said it. He had taken the private, condescending insult that had defined our marriage and polished it up for public consumption. He hadn't just said it to his parents or their friends. He had said it to the press. To the world. "She champions art for people who don't know any better." I looked at Chloe. Her professional mask had slipped. The look on her face wasn't curiosity or intrigue. It was pity. Pure, unadulterated pity. She knew exactly what he had just done. She knew he had just announced, in the most charming way possible, that he believed his wife's life's work was for idiots. Julian, oblivious, was still smiling, waiting for his applause. He looked at me, expecting me to play my part, to give a little self-deprecating laugh and agree. But I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I felt like I was encased in ice. The interview wrapped up quickly after that. I murmured a few monosyllabic answers, my mind a million miles away. Chloe gave me a brief, sympathetic glance as she left. The moment the door closed, Julian turned to me, beaming. "Well, I think that went splendidly, don't you? That people who don't know any better line was a stroke of genius, if I do say so myself. A bit provocative, but it really defines our brand, our dynamic. The classicist and the populist. It's perfect." He finally seemed to notice my silence, my stillness. "What's wrong?" he asked, his smile faltering. "You're very quiet." I finally looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't see the charismatic violinist I had fallen in love with. I saw a small man propped up by a brittle sense of superiority, so insecure that he had to diminish his own wife to feel important. "Our brand," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You think that's our brand? You, the gatekeeper of genius, and me, the purveyor of trash for the ignorant masses." His face clouded over with confusion. "Don't be so dramatic, Sabrina. It was a soundbite. A clever turn of phrase. You know what I meant?" "Yes," I said, a terrifying clarity washing over me. "I do. For the first time, I think I really, finally do." That night, I packed a single suitcase. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just moved with a quiet, methodical purpose. He followed me from room to room, protesting, arguing, not understanding. "You're leaving? Over a sentence? A marketing line? This is insane, Sabrina. You're throwing away our marriage over nothing." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. I turned to look at him one last time, standing there in the middle of our beautiful apartment, surrounded by the trappings of a life that had never truly been mine. "It wasn't nothing, Julian," I said. "It was everything." And then I walked out, and I did not look back. The first few months on my own were a brutal mix of liberation and terror. I found a tiny, cramped apartment in a neighborhood I could barely afford, with peeling paint and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The freedom was dizzying. I could eat cereal for dinner, leave my books piled up on the floor, and listen to music that wasn't centuries old. But the silence was also deafening. The self-doubt that Julian and his family had so carefully planted in me began to sprout in the quiet darkness of my new life. Their voices were a constant chorus in my head. "Asterisk, your work is frivolous. It has no weight. It's for people who don't know any better." Asterisk, I lost my confidence. I quit my job at the gallery, unable to face the pitying looks of my colleagues who had all read the magazine article. The feature had come out and Chloe, the reporter, had been mercilessly accurate. She had quoted Julian verbatim. The power couple was a laughingstock in the art community. I felt a hot flush of shame every time I left my apartment. For a while I did nothing. I just existed. I took long, aimless walks. I went to museums and stood in front of paintings, trying to feel the connection I once had, but it was gone. I felt like a fraud. Maybe they were right all along. One bleak, rainy afternoon, I called Anya. I confessed everything. That I had left Julian, that I had quit my job, that I felt like a complete and utter failure. She listened without judgment. When I was done, her voice came through the phone, clear and strong. "Good," she said. I was taken aback. "Good. Anya, I just told you my life has fallen apart." "No," she corrected me. "You told me you just demolished the cage you were living in. It's messy and it's scary, but now you're free. The question is, what are you going to build in its place? Don't let them have the last word, Sabrina. Don't let their definition of you be the one that sticks. Use this. Use the anger. Anger is a powerful, clarifying force. It can be fuel." Her words sparked something in me, a tiny ember in the cold ashes of my self-pity. Anger. She was right. I was angry. I was furious. I was tired of being small, of being defined, of being dismissed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my cheap kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, the rain lashing against the window. Anya's words echoed in my mind. What are you going to build? An idea began to form, a wild, audacious, impossible idea. What if culture wasn't something you had to go to? What if it came to you? What if art wasn't confined to silent, white-walled galleries or stuffy concert halls? What if it took over the city? What if it was interactive and playful, and free for everyone? An art festival. A public art festival. The city's first. An event that was the absolute antithesis of everything the Vanderbilts stood for. An event for the people who don't know any better. An event that would prove them wrong. The idea became an obsession. It was the fuel Anya had talked about. I spent the next 6 months of my life glued to my laptop. I researched every public art festival in the world. I studied their funding models, their programming, their logistical challenges. I started writing. I wrote a mission statement, a vision, a manifesto. I drafted budgets that made my head spin. And then I started writing grant proposals. My life became a cycle of research, writing, and rejection. I sent my proposal to every local arts council, every community foundation. The rejections started trickling in. An ambitious project, but beyond the scope of our funding. We are unable to support first-time events of this scale. While we admire the concept, the logistical framework seems unproven. Each no was a fresh wave of doubt, a whisper of Julian's voice in my ear. But for every rejection, I remembered the look of pity on that reporter's face, and the anger would flare up again, pushing me forward. I refined the proposal. I added more detail, more research, more passion. I was living off my meager savings and a part-time job cataloging archives for the university library, a quiet, dusty job that gave me time to think. And then I found it. The Atherton Foundation. They were a national organization with deep pockets and a reputation for funding bold, game-changing initiatives in the arts. Their mandate was all about access, innovation, and community engagement. They were a long shot, a Hail Mary, but their mission statement read like a perfect echo of my own. I poured everything I had into that one proposal. I wrote not just as a curator, but as a believer. I told the story of a city hungry for a new way to experience art. I wrote about breaking down the walls between art and people. I wrote with all the passion and fury and hope that I had. I sent it off, feeling a strange sense of calm. I had done everything I could. 2 months later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number from another state. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Sabrina Keller?" a warm voice asked. It was a program officer from the Atherton Foundation. My heart hammered against my ribs. She told me the board had just finished their final review. She told me they had been blown away by the vision, by the meticulous planning, by the sheer audacity of the project. And then she said the words that changed my life. "We are pleased to inform you that the board has voted to approve your grant request in the full amount." I dropped the phone. I literally dropped it. I sank to my knees on the cracked linoleum of my kitchen floor, and I sobbed. Not tears of sadness or anger, but of overwhelming, gut-wrenching relief. It was real. Someone believed in me. Someone saw the value in my frivolous idea. The grant was massive, more money than I had ever imagined handling. It was enough to bring the festival to life in the most spectacular way I could dream of. And as I sat there on the floor, the first coherent thought that cut through the emotional fog was a date. I knew the symphony's annual gala, their biggest, most self-congratulatory fundraising event of the year, was always held on the third weekend of September. A wicked, brilliant, terrifying idea sparked in my mind. My festival, the People's Festival of Interactive Art, would have its grand opening on the exact same weekend. With the grant secured, I went into overdrive. I assembled a small, hungry team of brilliant misfits like myself. A logistics genius who used to organize music festivals, a marketing whiz who was tired of selling soap, and a young, fearless assistant curator who saw this as the opportunity of a lifetime. Our office was a shared workspace with bad coffee and a great internet connection, and it became the epicenter of a creative earthquake. The real challenge and the sweetest part of my plan was sponsorship. The Atherton Grant was our foundation, but to make the festival truly spectacular, I needed corporate partners. I knew the symphony's sponsor list by heart. I also knew their audience, old, wealthy, and resistant to change. I did my research. I pulled the annual reports for the symphony's two biggest corporate sponsors, a cutting-edge technology firm called Omnicore and a luxury electric car company, Solara Motors. I read their marketing briefs, their mission statements, their quarterly earnings calls. Their brand identities were all about innovation, disruption, and reaching a younger, more dynamic demographic. And yet, here they were, plowing hundreds of thousands of dollars into an institution that was the very definition of the old guard. I saw a disconnect. I saw an opportunity. I didn't just send them a generic sponsorship package. I crafted a bespoke proposal for each of them. For Omnicore, I proposed a series of high-tech, digitally interactive installations that would showcase their technology in a way that felt organic and exciting, not like a trade show booth. For Solara, I proposed an entire Solara zone in the main park, featuring kinetic sculptures powered by clean energy, directly tying their brand to the art of the future. I showed them data, demographics, and a vision that was vibrant and forward-thinking. My proposal didn't just ask for their money, it offered them a piece of the cultural zeitgeist. I managed to get a meeting with the vice president of marketing at Omnicore, a woman named Maya. She was sharp, no-nonsense, and looked perpetually unimpressed. She listened to my pitch, her face giving nothing away. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This is very impressive, Ms. Keller," she said. "But we have a long-standing relationship with the symphony. It's a legacy partnership." I met her gaze. "I understand," I said. "And legacy is important. But your brand isn't about legacy. It's about what's next. The symphony offers you a table at a gala and your logo in a program that a few thousand people will see. I'm offering you 100,000 potential customers interacting directly with your brand and media coverage that will reach millions. The symphony is the past. My festival is the future. Where does Omnicore want to be?" She was silent for a long moment. Then, a slow smile spread across her face. "Send me the final contract," she said. 2 weeks later, Solara Motors followed suit. I had done it. I had poached two of their biggest sponsors, not with malice, but with a better idea. The news sent a shockwave through the city's small cultural elite. I heard through the grapevine that Eleanor Vanderbilt was incandescent with rage. The battle lines had been drawn. The opening night of the festival felt like a dream. The entire downtown park, a space usually quiet and deserted after dark, was thrumming with life. It was a riot of light, sound, and color. A massive, interactive light sculpture pulsed in time with the music being mixed by a live DJ. Children were laughing as they ran through a maze of holographic projections. A crowd was gathered around a huge, collaborative mural where anyone could pick up a brush and add their own mark. It was everything I had dreamed of and more. It was messy and loud and gloriously unapologetically populist. The air was electric with a kind of joy I had never seen at a cultural event before. This wasn't the quiet, reverent awe of a museum. This was the boisterous, living energy of a city falling in love with art. Every major news outlet was there, their cameras capturing the sheer scale and energy of it all. I was in the middle of an interview with a national news channel, trying to articulate the overwhelming emotion of the moment, when I saw them. Across the crowded plaza, moving through the joyful throngs like specters at a feast, were Julian and Eleanor. They looked completely out of place in their formal gala attire. Julian in his tuxedo, Eleanor in a stiff, beaded gown, their faces a perfect mask of horror and disbelief. They were staring at the spectacle around them as if they had stumbled into an alien civilization. I knew they hadn't come to wish me well. They had come to witness my failure, to confirm their own biases, to see the carnival they had surely predicted this would be. But there was no failure to witness. There was only this, a massive, undeniable success. My heart, which had been soaring, suddenly felt like a cold, hard stone in my chest. The fight wasn't over yet. They found me standing near the Omnicore installation, a stunning digital waterfall that cascaded down the side of a building. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Eleanor, ever the matriarch, spoke first. Her voice was ice. "Sabrina, what an interesting spectacle you've created." The word interesting was dripping with a decade's worth of condescension. Quite the carnival. Julian stepped forward, his face a complicated mess of anger and something I couldn't quite decipher. He reached for my arm, a gesture of ownership he no longer had any right to. "Sabrina, we need to talk. This is a disaster." I instinctively pulled my arm away from his touch. "A disaster?" I asked, my voice steady, much steadier than I felt. "Look around, Julian. The mayor is here. We've exceeded our projected attendance for the entire weekend in the first 3 hours. The sponsors are ecstatic. What part of this is a disaster?" "The gala," he sputtered, his composure finally cracking. "Our gala. The one our family has poured its heart and soul into for 3 generations. You've deliberately tried to sabotage it. Stealing our sponsors, scheduling this circus on the same night. It's vindictive and it's petty." Eleanor nodded in grim agreement. "We expected better of you, Sabrina. Even after everything. This is a betrayal not just to Julian, but to the entire cultural fabric of this city." That was it. That was the moment the last vestiges of fear and self-doubt burned away, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. I looked from Julian's furious face to Eleanor's mask of aristocratic outrage, and I felt nothing but a profound sense of pity for them. They were trapped in their velvet-lined box, and they couldn't even see the bars. "No, Eleanor," I said, my voice cutting through the festive noise around us. "You have it all wrong. This isn't a betrayal of the city's cultural fabric. This is the city's cultural fabric. This is what it looks like when it's alive, when it's for everyone, not just the people who can afford a $5,000 a plate ticket." I turned to Julian, and I let all the years of hurt and humiliation fuel my words, but I kept my voice calm and level. "You call this petty? You want to talk about petty, Julian? Petty is spending years married to someone and calling their passion a delightfully populist hobby at every dinner party. Petty is smiling while you belittle my life's work. The real pettiness was your constant, dripping disdain for anything you didn't deem worthy." I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only they could hear me. "And that comment you made to the reporter? The one you were so proud of? You said I championed art for people who don't know any better. You thought it was a clever soundbite. But it wasn't. It was a gift. It was my liberation. You freed me from the desperate, pathetic need to win your approval." A small crowd had started to gather, drawn by the drama of a woman in a simple black dress, standing up to a man in a tuxedo and a woman dripping in diamonds. A news camera, sensing a story, slowly panned in our direction. I knew this was my one chance to say everything I had never been able to say. I raised my voice slightly, letting it carry. "You were right about one thing. I do champion art for people who don't know any better. But it's not because they're ignorant. It's because they're open. They don't need a degree in art history to be moved. They don't need provenance to feel a connection. They just need to be invited to the party." I gestured to the laughing, cheering, art-loving crowd all around us. "Look at them, Julian. Look at these people. They know exactly what they like, and they are having the time of their lives. So maybe the problem isn't with the people who don't know any better. Maybe the problem is with the people who think they know best, but have forgotten how to see." Julian and Eleanor just stood there, speechless, their faces pale in the pulsing, colorful lights of the festival. They looked like statues from a forgotten era, suddenly unearthed in a vibrant new world they could not comprehend. I didn't wait for a response. I gave them a small, final nod, and I turned my back on them. I walked away, not looking back, my head held high, and went to go greet the mayor, who was beaming and shaking hands, completely oblivious to the quiet war that had just been won right under his nose. The next morning, my face was on the front page of the city paper's lifestyle section. The headline read, "A Tale of Two Galas. Vibrant New Art Festival Eclipses Stuffy Symphony Soir." The article was a masterpiece of journalistic shade. It juxtaposed photos of the diverse, joyful crowds at my festival with pictures of the sparse, elderly attendees at the symphony gala. It quoted the mayor, who called the festival a bold new chapter in our city's cultural life. It mentioned, in passing, the unfortunate last-minute withdrawal of 2 major corporate sponsors from the symphony event. And, in a moment of pure poetic justice, it included an extended quote from me, talking about my mission to make art accessible and democratic. Chloe, the reporter who had witnessed my public humiliation, had written the piece. It was her own form of vindication. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Texts and emails poured in from artists, colleagues, and even strangers, all congratulating me. The CEO of the Atherton Foundation called me personally. "Sabrina," he said, his voice booming with enthusiasm, We took a chance on you, and you didn't just deliver, you started a revolution. We are already discussing funding for next year. It was all so overwhelming, so validating, that it barely felt real. In the midst of the triumphant chaos, my phone rang with a number I knew all too well. Julian. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text appeared. Sabrina, please. We need to talk. Against my better judgment, I called him back. I needed to hear what he had to say. His voice was a strange cocktail of remorse and resentment. Sabrina, he began. I saw the paper. I'm sorry. The apology was thin, brittle. Sorry for what, exactly, Julian? I asked, my voice cool. Sorry that I was right. Or sorry that I was successful. That's not fair, he whined. You didn't have to be so public. So vindictive. You set out to humiliate my family. No, Julian, I said, my patience wearing thin. I set out to build something beautiful. The humiliation was just a side effect of you and your mother showing up to gloat at my predicted failure. You walked right into it. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, the sponsors, Sabrina, that was a low blow. My mother is devastated. I almost laughed. Your mother will recover. And those sponsors left because I offered them a better vision of the future, something your institution has been unwilling or unable to do. This wasn't personal. It was business. Something your family, of all people, should understand. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. I could hear his breathing, ragged and uncertain. What do you want from me? He finally whispered. It was a question born of defeat, not understanding. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I didn't want anything from him anymore. Not an apology, not an explanation, not a single thing. Nothing, Julian, I said, and the words felt like the truest I had ever spoken. I want absolutely nothing from you. I ended the call before he could reply. I felt a profound sense of closure, as if I had just closed a very old, very heavy door. Later that evening, my small team and I gathered in our now too small office space. We celebrated with cheap champagne in plastic cups, surrounded by piles of paperwork and empty coffee mugs. We were exhausted and exhilarated. We read the glowing press reviews out loud, laughing and cheering. In that room, with those people who had believed in my crazy idea and worked tirelessly to make it real, I felt a sense of belonging that I had never once felt in the Vanderbilts' opulent mansion. This was my family. This was my orchestra. And the music we were making was for everyone. I got an offer a few weeks later, a prestigious job as the head curator of a major contemporary art museum in a much larger city. It was the kind of job I had dreamed of before Julian, before the Vanderbilts had clipped my wings. My team was nervous I would take it, and for a day I considered it. It was a safe, established path. But then I looked out my apartment window at the park, now quiet again, and I thought of the joy and life that had filled it. I had built that. I had started something new. Leaving now would feel like abandoning my own creation. I politely declined the offer, affirming my commitment to my city and my festival. I had found my place. I wasn't going anywhere. A year passed. The first annual interactive art festival was no longer a one-off event, but an institution in the making, and we were deep in the planning for our second year, with a bigger budget and even more ambitious plans. I was speaking on a panel at the university about the role of public art in urban revitalization. I was no longer Sabrina, the woman with the populist eye. I was Sabrina Keller, the festival director, a respected voice in the arts community. After the panel, as I was packing up my notes, a young woman approached me hesitantly. She looked familiar, but I couldn't immediately place her. She had the same dark, intense eyes as Julian. It was his youngest sister, Clara, a cellist I had only met a handful of times at family gatherings. She had always been the quiet one, the observer. Sabrina, she said, her voice soft. I'm so sorry to bother you. I'm Clara Vanderbilt. I braced myself, expecting some kind of delayed family defense. Instead, she looked at me with an expression of genuine admiration. I just wanted to say, what you did with the festival last year was incredible. Truly. I came on the second night with some friends, and it was the most inspiring thing I've ever seen in this city. I was stunned into silence. She continued, a blush rising on her cheeks. My family, they're stuck. You know that. They believe there's only one way for art to be. For music to be. Watching you build something so different, so successful, it gave me courage. She took a deep breath. I dropped out of the conservatory last semester. I'm playing cello in a jazz fusion band now. My parents are horrified, of course. But I'm happy. I'm making my own music. And I wanted to thank you for showing me that was possible. In all my dreams of revenge and vindication, I had never imagined this. I had never considered that my actions might not just be a rebellion, but an inspiration. That by freeing myself, I might inadvertently show someone else the key to their own cage. It was a moment of grace, a quiet, unexpected resolution that meant more to me than all the triumphant headlines. I had set out to prove my worth to people who were incapable of seeing it. But along the way, I had discovered that my worth was never up for their debate. It was inherent. It was in the work I did, the joy I created, and the community I was building. The greatest victory wasn't in their defeat, but in my own discovery of a world where I didn't need their validation to thrive. Looking back, the years I spent trying to win the approval of the Vanderbilt family feel like a lifetime ago, a story about a different person. That person believed her value was something that could be granted to her by others. She thought that if she just tried hard enough, learned enough, and made herself small enough, she would eventually be deemed worthy. I learned in the most public and painful way that you cannot audition for a role in someone else's life if the part they've written for you is too small to contain your spirit. The most powerful thing I ever did was to stop auditioning and start writing my own script. My ex-husband's cutting remark, that I championed art for people who don't know any better, turned out to be the truest thing he ever said about me, just not in the way he intended. It became my mission statement. I've learned that being underestimated is not a weakness. It can be a superpower. It allows you to build your dreams in peace while the world isn't watching. And when they finally turn their attention to you, it's not to see you starting out, but to witness what you've already built. The foundation of your success is a surprise to them, but not to you. So my final thought for you is this: never let anyone else define the value of your passion. Your world, your interests, your frivolous hobbies, they have weight and they have meaning because they are yours. Build your own festival, whatever that may be. I would love to hear from you all in the comments. Have you ever had a passion that someone else dismissed? How did you learn to honor it and find your own way? Share your story, because every story shared helps build a community of people who understand. And of course, if this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about finding your voice and rewriting your narrative. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. Remember that the most important cultural institution you will ever be a part of is the one you build for yourself. I wish you all the strength to do just that. Thank you for listening.